What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. All right, so before I get into this video, I want to give a big shout out to the brother Aaron for showing love once again with a donation to the channel. And he wanted me to talk about just how good Dr. J, Rick Barry, and John Havlicek were. Because obviously, the so-called basketball world, the media, does not care about these players. You can see they have a very limited perspective of the history of the league. They think that the NBA only goes back to 1990, and what they don't know, in their arrogance, they just count as inferior without doing any proper research whatsoever. And it's growing evidence to show and suggest that there is a calculated effort to ignore the NBA before the 80s. And it's going to get worse. That's why you're starting to see, as the years go by, people now starting to discount Magic and Larry, because as a new generation comes in, further removed from the 80s, it's all cyclical, man. But you know the thing about it? Eventually, they're going to try to start discounting the entire 2000s, which they're already starting to do now. But anyway, let's talk about John Havlicek. You know, when you have idiots like JJ Redneck say that, you know, these guys were plumbers and firemen and they weren't very athletic. I know oftentimes I see people show photos of Michael Jordan with Danny Ainge, insinuating, oh, this guy, and they'll have Danny Ainge bent over on defense or crouched in his defensive stance, I should say, making him look smaller, right? And then to give you the impression that Jordan didn't play against anybody. Oh, this is a slow white guy. Only to find out that when Danny Ainge was in high school, he was a three-sport star. He was a basketball star, he was a football star, and he was a baseball star. As a matter of fact, Danny Ainge played for a professional baseball team, which is something even Michael Jordan never accomplished. He played for the Toronto Blue Jays. But see, nitwits like JJ Redneck wouldn't know that. And I bring it up to bring up this point. John Havlicek was actually, if I remember serves me correctly, was drafted by the Cleveland Browns. He could have pursued a career as a wide receiver in the NFL, right? But he chose to focus on basketball. Okay, he chose to focus on basketball. And I think his early motivation was money. I think the NBA players made a little bit more money than the football players at that time, especially when you were just starting off. But that proved to be the right decision. But John Havlicek was not a guy who came into the NBA the player that he ultimately became. He had to work hard at it. He was not a great offensive player. He couldn't really shoot. He had skills as far as defense, but he was not a great offensive player. That's something that he worked on relentlessly. He worked on his passing as a player, and ultimately he became the best sixth man in the NBA. And then in the post-Russell era, the post-Bill Russell era, he became the team's leader. And because of his unique physical attributes, he had lungs that were much larger than normal, which gave him an advantage that players at the time didn't have, or anybody had in the league, as far as his endurance. One thing I always wonder is, what if, and I'm not saying this would be ethical, but what if those guys were on steroids? What if they had the benefits of all of the nutrition and the, let's be honest, PED usage that these guys use today, which gives them superhuman abilities down here? What if Will Chamberlain was on PED? I'm just saying, like, can we have this conversation? Since it seems like it's okay to do it now. But Yeah, John Havlicek, great defensive player. I think he's probably one of the two greatest defensive small forwards the game has ever seen. Him and Scottie Pippen. He worked his way into becoming at least a dependable shooter. He became a really good scorer, arguably great scorer. He's still the all-time leading scorer for the Boston Celtics. He was an underrated rebounder, a great leader, and a great clutch performer. One of the great clutch performers of his era. And he won eight NBA championships, never lost an NBA Finals, and won 2 championships outside of Bill Russell. So salute to him. Dr. J, he kind of had 2 careers. He had his ABA career and his NBA career. And then when he played in college in Massachusetts, I think University of Massachusetts, he was a very good player, but it was in the open court where we really saw Dr. J game go to new heights. Prior to the arrival of guys like Dr. J and Earl the Pearl Monroe and Pete Maravich, the game was a lot more conservative. Dunking was frowned upon. Outside of Bob Cousy, we didn't really see razzle dazzle with ball handling, and the game was called a certain way. The game was called very conservatively. Idiots like, some of these guys in the media, like Nick Wrong and others, they don't seem to comprehend, or they just completely ignore that when they say, well, if you put this player in 1971, they would dominate. Not understanding that the rules were so different and so inhibiting at times for an offensive player to do the things that they wanted to do. These tremendous moves and the crossovers and all this rampant traveling that we see, they wouldn't be able to get away with that. The way these guys get the stiff arm and none of that. And there's resistance at the rim. Shot blockers, rim protectors, enforcers, huge bodies. These guys' field goal percentages would be much lower because they would have to be forced to be jump shooters. And there was no 3-point line. So with no 3-point line, you're not padding your point total as much. So all these things need to be taken into consideration. But going back to Dr. J was pretty much like the Michael Jordan of the ABA, man. I mean, so dominant in that league. I think he won, 3 MVPs, I believe it was, in the ABA. 2 or 3 championships in the ABA, won scoring titles in the ABA. He was at his best with I think they were the New York Nets, I believe it was. And he truly is the one that holds the scoring record for the Nets franchise. They'll say, it's Kyrie Erving. No. Was it Kyrie? Yeah, I think Kyrie had 60, right? They'll say it's Kyrie Erving, but actually Dr. J had 63 points in the game in the ABA. But Dr. J was a high flyer, tremendously athletic, won the first slam dunk contest, 41-inch vertical leap on a guy that was 6'7", 6'8", long wingspan, huge hands, could pull off so many miraculous moves around the basket, could finish. One of the great finishers in the history of the game, one of the greatest, arguably the greatest in-game dunker, at least along with Dominique Wilkins, that we've ever seen. And ultimately, he expanded his game to the point where he developed a dependable mid-range shot, an underrated rebounder, very underrated defender, underrated shot blocker. Dr. J was a tremendous player, man, and I don't think he gets the credit he deserves. At all. It's really disgusting how people think he's just a dunker. Unbelievable. And then, of course, you have Rick Barry, who I think fits more in today's game than any of the other two. He fits more into today's game. He's a great passer. He's a great ball thief, underrated defender, and a great shooter, and a great free throw shooter. And, he was probably, although the term had not been created yet, because the first time it was created, or the first time the term point forward was used, was with Marquise, what's his name? With the Milwaukee Bucks. I don't know why I want to say Marquise Daniels. That's not his name. Jesus Christ, I forget his damn name, man. Y'all know what I'm talking about. The first real point forward that we've seen was Rick Barry. Now, Rick Barry, when he first came into the NBA, was more of a primary scorer, right? He crashed the boards as far as rebounding, but he was more of a primary scorer, main role, going out there and putting up points. But playing in the ABA, which ultimately, compared to the NBA, the ABA was probably inferior when it comes to big men. That's why Artis Gilmore, as great as he was, looked like Wilt Chamberlain, because there wasn't as much competition in the ABA when it came to centers, right? That's also been my point about Nikola Jokic. I think if there was more centers, at least 70, 80% of his skill set, his numbers would be a little bit less. It's just common sense. If you put Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in the early 1960s, he's putting up close to Wilt Chamberlain numbers. And that's not a knock on Wilt. It's just, it is what it is. But going back to my point, though, while the ABA had inferior center play, the ABA ultimately, after a couple of years compared to the NBA, had superior guard play and superior athleticism. And they were the first league that started having guys being high flyers. You know what I'm saying? Connie Hawkins, Dr. J, David Thompson, etc. Right? So playing against these guys on a daily basis with superior guard play elevated Rick Barry's skills. He got in better shape. He became a better ball handler playing in the ABA, a better defender. So he was a different player when he came back to the NBA in 1973. He was a different player, and we saw that. And that's why he was essentially playing point forward, even though that term wasn't used yet. We didn't see that term really until, and I don't know why I'm blanking with the guy's name when it comes to Milwaukee Bucks. Man, I can't believe I'm blanking his name right now. But anyway, yeah, Rick Barry, I think today's game, he would fit in solidly. I think he'd be a better three-point shooter because there's more emphasis on the three-point shot. He was already a great mid-range shooter. He's one of the great free throw shooters the game's ever seen, 89, 90%. Good rebounder, great playmaker. He would be way up there in steals per game. I think he'd be a perennial MVP candidate. Only thing I would think that would get him in trouble is that Rick Barry, when it comes to whining about calls, he would be Luka on steroids. His teammates didn't like him. I don't think he'd be a really likable guy. And I think he would be outspoken about a lot of stuff. So that I'm just putting him in today's world, that would keep him from, I think, winning certain awards if it's voted on by media, because they couldn't stand him. You know what I'm saying? But if you're talking about just from skills, yeah, I think that Rick Barry would fit in today's game. And that's just how I look at that. But a minute. I gotta figure this out. Wait a minute. Why am I blanking with this guy's name? Give me 1 second. I got to figure this out. Marquise Johnson. Jesus Christ. I don't know why my brain kept saying Marquise Daniels. That's not right. It's not Marquise Daniels. Marquise Johnson. Yeah. Anyway, Marquise Johnson is the first. He invented the term point forward, playing under Don Nelson. But the first real point forward, as far as us seeing him play, that position was Rick Barron, although they didn't use that term. But anyway, that's all I got to say about that, man. Tell me what you guys think.